Hey, my name is Meg Gardner, and I'm a writer. You may have heard of my novels Unsub, or China Lake, or Phantom Instinct, or some others. One thing you might not know about me is that I am a three-time Jeopardy champion, which means I'm a trivia geek. I became a writer because there is nothing better than creating entire worlds out of my own imagination and seeing that readers fall into those worlds and connect with the characters and think of them as their real friends and family and people they would aspire to be. I started writing in high school when my best friend was about to move overseas, so I wrote a novel for her to take with her. And it was probably pretty terrible because I was 15 and it was the first novel I'd ever written. But it made her and all my friends cry. So I thought, wow, there's something to this and I want to try to do it again. And now here I am. I've written 13 novels that have been published, and I still think it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to have these worlds that are exciting and suspenseful and dramatic, and have readers feel like these people in the stories are real people to them. I would encourage you to be a writer, because the more you pour out the stories that are inside of you, the more you will be filled up with new ideas and wonder and excitement, and you will be able to create your own worlds that readers will connect with as well. And it's important that you tell the stories the way that only you can, that only your voice can express. That's wonderful and exciting and important. So go for it.
I do try to write every day. I regard inspiration as something that's wonderful, but not necessary, because you can't just wait around for it to strike. Strangely, if you sit down with a pad of paper or sit down at your keyboard and start typing, inspiration tends to show up. It looks and sounds a lot like work. So that is actually the secret. Just do it. If you can get words down on the page, you can always fix them. You can't fix a blank page. You
Sort
can
of like painting a wall. You can always retouch it or repaint it.
Precisely. So I am fortunate to have a publishing contract, and deadlines are an incredible inspiration.
Yeah.
Your publisher would really like the book so that they can get it on the shelves. And I've trained myself to learn what works for me is that I spend probably a year from conception to final, polishing the book. And that includes a couple of months of research, brainstorming, outlining. I know a lot of people hate to outline. I find that works best for me. It's whatever works for you as a writer.
Yeah. You're not what they
Some
call
people,
a pantser, right?
no. I've tried that before, and I ended up so far up the creek without a paddle, a canoe, a machete to hack my way out of the weeds that I just got lost. So I find it works best for me if I can sketch the broad course of the story, the arc of the story, from beginning, turning points, major characters, what the conflict is, to the ending. Because if I can get at least a broad idea of how this story should end, I can go back and make sure that I've started it in the right place.
Yeah. And you write in the mornings?
I write whenever I have the time and wherever I am. I write after I've had a pot of coffee. I will say that inspiration does sound a lot like a dark brew in my world.
Caffeine-infused writing.
Right.
Really wanted to talk to you about the Unsub series, your newest series. And can you talk to us about the story creation process, and what kind of inspired you to start that series? What was that spark to say, this would be a really good new series to start?
I decided I was going to write about a law enforcement officer. Caitlin started out as a as a cop, now works for the FBI as a special agent, and that means you got to think of a crime. She's always going to have work, but there's always got to be something that launches the story, and these are crime novels, so there's got to be a crime. The first one had been bubbling around in my mind for ages. Unsub was sparked by the Zodiac. I grew up in California, and I'm old enough to remember actually seeing a police artist sketch in the newspaper of the Zodiac with the black hood with the strange symbol on the front, this eye holes, a guy holding a gun, and asking my parents, "What's that? Who's that?" and having them explain what the Zodiac was. And then for the next God knows how many years, I was convinced that he was going to come through my window at any
My bus
night.
driver.
So it got me so interested in who would do those kinds of crimes. Somebody who could not be found, even though he was witnessed many times. The famous drawings of the Zodiac with his face visible were police sketches done by San Francisco patrol officers who apparently drove straight past him on the street.
Wow.
Immediately after he had killed a cab driver. He literally walked straight away from multiple crime scenes. He called the police to confess, to tell them that there had been murders, sometimes literally across the street from the sheriff's office, from the payphone. And I just was fascinated and horrified by who would do something like this and how he got away. Of course, the Zodiac just disappeared. In my twisted thriller writer brain, I thought, okay, if somebody like that goes on a long holiday, what's to stop him from deciding he wants to have a cold case heat up again? What's to stop him from wanting to revisit his glory days and come back?
Sure.
So that was the genesis of Unsub. It was about a legendary cold case that turns hot again. From 25 years ago and in the present day. And that gave me the idea that you got these cases, separated by a generation, then who would be the people hunting this Unsub, this unknown subject? And I thought it would be a young cop just rising up, and the original investigator had been her father, who could not break the case, who instead had the case break him because it was so horrible. So that, it's a family story.
Adam's family story.
Just turning back to Unsub. So CBS bought the rights to Unsub before it was even published, which congratulations, first of all. That's pretty cool. And I know Hollywood's known for doing all kinds of crazy things and not doing things and doing things. Will you be involved at all in the process, or would you be willing to if they asked you?
Oh, absolutely. I would not start off being a screenwriter or a showrunner. That's not my expertise. But I would love to be involved in editing, writing, overseeing the projects eventually. So I cannot give you any more details at the moment.
A little bit.
That works.
I can't tell you anything right now, but I hope I'll have news before too long.
And so while you were in college, you took a creative writing course taught by Ron Hansen, the novelist who wrote The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward of Robert Ford.
Yeah.
And what would you say was the most important thing that he taught you?
He said every story has a beginning, a muddle, and an end.
Sounds like my writing.
And he said every ending should be surprising yet inevitable. And that has stuck with me more than anything else. It means that you've got, as a writer, you have to keep your audience in suspense. You have to lead them in directions that include misdirection, provide clues, hints, bits of personality for the characters, a rising sense of conflict that the reader senses, but you still have to keep some surprises in reserve so that when you hit that finale and the climax takes place, that readers are going to go, wow, I did not see that coming.
writing a legal brief, how would that be similar to, say, outlining, a particular novel? Is there any similarities there?
That's a great question. And it actually, it translates less and more than you would think. When I first started writing fiction, I had to let go of trying to, fill in the show my work as far as which statute or which case law would apply to this story, because that's not what it's about. But when you're a trial lawyer, when you write briefs, you are trying to persuade the court.
Yeah.
And every legal case is a story. It's a narrative. It's a tale of something that has gone wrong between parties. There's conflict between them, just like in fiction.
Yeah.
And as a lawyer, it's your ethical obligation as an advocate to present your client's story in as compelling a fashion as you possibly can to convince the judge or the jury of the justice of your case. So you have to learn to write extremely persuasively. You have to learn to anticipate rebuttals, figure out what the opposite, the opposing counsel, what are they going to come back at? That nobody's just going to believe you when you state X, Y, and Z. You have to be ready for what's coming back at you. So that anticipates what readers will say if you kind of gloss over plot holes. You just have to learn how to really nail the law, but as well present your client's story in a really sympathetic and persuasive way. So that was extremely, extremely helpful as far as moving into fiction. But of course, if you blow the story in a book, you're just going to get, whiny emails from a reader. The judge is not going to hold against your client and tell him to pay $100,000
I'm curious as to you, what drew you to thrillers, and maybe what do you think has drawn so many women into being top-notch thriller writers?
Well, I think it's as far as how many women have gone into it. It's like sports. It's like track and field, where the records started falling when the world came into the sport, when it wasn't just the Chariots of Fire guys, as much as I like them from the university, but it was the people from Australia and Mexico and Kenya and Ethiopia that suddenly people realized that there was this opportunity, and it's something that they love. So I think women, I got into it because thrillers were what I loved to read. By the time I was in high school, I was reading science fiction, thrillers, and that was what gripped me. That was just, the big plots where people have their backs up against the wall, their lives, their worlds are falling apart. The stakes are life and death for them, their family, their community, or perhaps the world, and it's up to them to rise to the occasion. And I decided if I was going to spend all that time writing something, I wanted it to be the kind of thing that I would like to read.
Unnatural silences, where if you walk into a bar or a restaurant, the conversation goes dead. The kids are playing downstairs and suddenly there's no noise in the house whatsoever. You're alone in the house at night and the birds stop singing, the dogs stop barking, and there should be noise outside and there's nothing. That lets you know that something underhanded, potentially embarrassing, but more likely dangerous could be happening. And now that I've scared myself into thinking about that, I'll try to put that into my next book.